Thank you very much for coming. My name is Marty Goldberg. I am the co-author of the book Atari Inc. Business is Fun. It's about an 800-page book on the history of the very first Atari company, Atari Inc., which was around from 72 to 84. But technically we go back to the late 60s to its beginnings at, believe it or not, Ampex and traversing through there. Today we're going to be joined by my co-author, Curt Vendel, live via Skype, and we're going to talk a bit. And towards the end, we're going to have a surprise guest, famed pinball designer Steve Ritchie will be joining us for a short interview. So we'll be conducting an interview so you can see what it was like when we conducted these interviews for the book. So what I'm going to do right now is hop on Skype and get Curt on here, and we'll get going. Now, what we're also going to do is feel free to raise your hand and ask questions during any time, because we're just going to talk about the making of the book and ramble on a bit. And if you guys have any questions about anything, just interject, and we'll be happy to answer it for you. So let me get Curt on. Hey Curt, can you hear me? Okay? Yeah. You got volume? Speak again. Can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. I'm going to back off. Can you see the audience?
A little bit, if you can kind of turn the camera. There we go. Wow, there's a lot of ugly people out there. But again, I'm ugly too, so that's how I can recognize what ugly is.
Okay, so I just made the introduction about our book, and I told them that we're going to be talking about our experiences making it, and they're going to
buy it now, buy.
Yeah, the book will be for sale at the end of this speech over there, and I'll be signing autographs in person. It's at a special show price of $25. So, also, if you see somebody raise their hands, it's because I told them that they can ask any questions they want as we're talking, and we'll answer them as best as we can in the time. And then Steve will be joining us about the last 20-15 minutes. Okay? So, why don't you introduce your background and how you got involved with this, and then I'll go with mine.
Okay. Well, everyone pretty much knows I run AtariMuseum.com. I've been involved with Atari really heavily as a user, going all the way back into the 80s, and then 84 when the Tremails took over. I started looking into why the computers, the video games, all the products they were going to release weren't released. I actually called into Atari, pretended to be a third-party engineering company, and said, "Hey, I've got this product. I need your engineers to approve. Can you put me through?" And they actually put me through to engineering, and I started speaking with an engineer, and I'm like, "Hey, I just got through, to talk to somebody. What's going on? Where are the computers? Where's the video games?" And the guy talked to me and said, under new management, different products are coming out. The old stuff's not going to be done. I'm like, "Well, I've seen reviews of this stuff. You have any of it?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. A couple guys took stuff home. There's some stuff out in the company store. The stuff here in the locker." I'm like, "Okay. Any way to get some of that stuff?" And he helped me, put me in touch with a bunch of people, and they put me in touch with more people and more people. And then, of course, as time went by, I started collecting a lot of the hardware. But then at one point, somebody said, "Well, I've got this piece of equipment, and I've got all my engineering notes that I wrote when I developed it. Do you want that stuff?" And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds kind of neat." So I get the box, I open up the hardware, look at it, and then I look at the engineering books, and I'm like, wow, this is so much more important. Here are the guy's handwritten notes. He's actually listed every day what was happened, a meeting, this project was canceled, this was started, they changed this feature, changed this screw, whatever it was, from something minor to something major. And then there'd be little side comments, hey, we went out to dinner, we did this, we met with the the Microsoft guys, or whatever it happened to have been. And I started to realize this is a time capsule. This is really more important than that piece of plastic and that piece of metal. that I just got, yeah, it's rare, but it's nothing compared to what's written in these notes, and started to realize there's a lot more to Atari than just a piece of software or a computer or you know, a video game. So that I started going more after the engineering notes and after the engineering logs, schematics, things like that.
Do you have one of those that you can show?
Things just kind of progressed and built up, and at one point, you know, it dawned on me, that's when I started building the Atari Museum. Originally it was called Atari Prototypes and Vaporwares, because I was so focused on, oh, let's show people these prototypes, these vaporwares, the stuff that never came out. And then I changed over, it became Atari Museum, and I realized that I want to start telling the story of how did these products start becoming what they were. So a lot of people started to notice that I started putting in names they'd never heard before. Everyone had heard of Nolan Bushnell and Ray Kassar, Al Alcorn, and you know, some of the more, I guess you'd call them kind of rock stars. You know, the Ed Rothberg, the Dave Thor, you know, those kind of guys. But nobody had ever heard of people like Mark Biasotti or Regan Chen or, I don't know, this guy that's going to come on tomorrow. What's his name? Owen Rubin. Oh, yeah, reminds me of a sandwich. Yeah, Rubin, that's it. Yeah.
By the way, do you have one of those engineering logs you can hold up? You have one handy?
Sure, hold on one second. Let me go grab one.
Okay. While he's doing that, as far as my background, I started with the site ClassicGaming.com in about 1999. And started building up an archive on not just Atari, but pretty much all across the video game industry and the retro gaming industry. And started writing articles for the site, as many of you people who come every year know, and know a little bit about me. And I also write for Retro Gamer magazine. And my section, the Electronic Entertainment Museum, is the archive itself. I try and display a small section of my vast warehouse full of archive every year. So that's pretty much it. We'll get to how we hooked up with this. But do you have a log then, or?
Yeah, I grabbed a couple. See if I can do this and you can actually see some of this stuff. Here, let me see if I can hold this up so everybody can kind of see. You know, here's one of the electronic board games, the Game of Life. And you know, here's the actual, I don't know if that's coming out okay on the screen there, but this is actually, I mean, a hand-colored pencil drawing of an electronic board game they were developing. And here's what I'm talking about, like the notes that were written from each day. You know, this is from August of 1977, talking about a review of the paper and some other things, but this just kind of gives you an idea. You know, Polaroids of the actual test prototypes, more, you know, circuits, notes about problems. You know, here's an actual schematic tucked in here that of a more refined, finished version. This gives you an idea, going day by day, what was going on. It really gave a picture, an inside picture. This is really, you know, I like to call these my Rosetta Stones, because these unlocked a lot of the innards of what was going on in Atari. It really tells what's going on, because while you hear a lot of stories from a lot of the people that work there, their memories aren't necessarily crystal clear. They may have misremembered an event or a time or the person they worked with or whatever it happened to be. And you know, some people do it to kind of glorify their time. Other people just honestly, they just, you know, that's how they remember it. So to get the stories from them and then to actually go and be able to cross-check it with the actual written notes, I mean, this helps change things from myth, lore, and rumor to real facts, and that's kind of where things went. So I ran Atari Museum for quite a few years, and I'd been approached by a couple of TV shows and Discovery, History, stuff like that. And I forget who it was. I think it was Discovery Channel was supposed to do a segment on 70s video games or something like that. And I hadn't heard from them for 2 weeks and had no idea what was going on, so I'm like, I guess it's over. So one Saturday morning, I get a ring at the doorbell, and here's this whole film crew. And I'm not showered, I'm not shaved, I look like a wreck, and we start taping, and nothing was ready yet. I hadn't had a chance to sit down and clean and do everything really nicely, make everything really presentable, because I thought it was not going to happen. So they do the segment as best we can. I'm all unshaven, and I got my hat on like I have now. That's all because I'm going bald. And some of the stuff wasn't properly cleaned. There was a little dust on it. So the show comes out. Marty writes up a review on it, and I didn't know Marty. So 2003, 2004, no, 2002, 2003. See what I mean? Even my own memory. It's only 10 years. These guys talking to Atari people, you're talking 20, 30 years ago. It was 2002, 2003. So Marty writes up a review on this segment, and I read the review. And needless to say, I didn't think it was all that flattering. So I emailed him and I said, hey, I think you're being a little rough on me. You didn't talk to me directly, and here's what happened. And we started talking on the phone, and what turned into thinking, okay, I'm going to be kind of defensive, and I think we're going to get into an argument here. We started talking, and he started telling me some of his likes and dislikes and about what he's trying to do. I told him mine, and before we know it, we're becoming really good friends. And we start talking about doing some work, doing stuff, doing articles for our website. Marty's asking me about helping out with articles for magazines. And somehow or another, the topic came up, about writing a book. And back in 1999, I was actually starting a book with Leonard Herman. And everybody pretty much knows who Leonard Herman is. He wrote Phoenix and wrote, ABC to VCS. He's a great guy. But the project never went off the ground, and it really was going to be more product-centric. It wasn't really going to be the way I wanted it to be. So Marty and I started talking, and we wanted to do a history of Atari, but we wanted to do something different. We didn't want to be we didn't want to do the same thing that everyone else was doing, which was idolizing the plastic, the metal, and the corporate side of Atari. We wanted to take all that away. Let's get behind the door, let's get behind the products, and let's look at them and say, well, how did this product happen? Who worked on it? How did it get from an idea in someone's head to actually being on the store shelves at Sears or Toys R Us or wherever, Computerland, wherever it happened to have been? So that was the goal there, was to go and find out what's the history behind the products, what's the history behind the company, and that was the focus. And it was to really delve down, not to go to all the rock stars, all the people that most people already knew about. We wanted to get down to talking to the secretaries, to the facility managers, to the guys that, modified TVs to put them in the original Pong machines. So we really went out of our way to find a lot of people, a lot of diverse individuals that had from the biggest role to the tiniest role, and everyone was equally important. And then, of course, finding out what's the culture like. How does it change from the 60s, the late 60s, to moving into the 70s, going into the 80s, and beyond. And that's kind of how the whole premise and the whole idea of the book happened. So that's more or less, in a nutshell, how we ended up going from where we were to getting the book out and getting it out the door.
Right, and it's important, I want to point out too, in addition to what he said, we also wanted to make sure we didn't center the book around one specific person, because that's what's been done a lot in the past, and it's usually only centered around Nolan Bushnell. And while he's obviously very important to the story of Atari, he was by far not the only person involved. So we wanted to give everybody an even chance in this book, and basically have no one main character, no one main person. So we try to get as many different people's stories as possible, which is why we wanted to really go through this and interview all these different people. And most of the, everybody we contacted was pretty much gracious. They let, we had ed logs, engineering logs for a bit. that he loaned to us. A number of other engineers did, so we could actually make copies for the archives and use the material for the book. There were people that you know, donated photographs, or people that donated you know, shirts and other stuff for the archive. I mean, lots of great things, right?
Yeah, we ended up with a lot of stuff. In fact, we had to make a, we were lugging around so much stuff at one point when we went out for one of our interview sessions out in California. We actually had to stop midweek, go to a UPS store, and shipped back, I think it was about 90 pounds worth of stuff. And it was just between logs and books and binders and all sorts of stuff. It just had to all come back, and it was getting out of hand. And obviously, I wasn't going to be lugging that stuff back on an airplane with us, so that got UPS back. But it was good to get a lot of that stuff and actually be able to, you know, be able to scan it, return it, or those who they donated it now, you know, as a lot of people have seen, I mean, Marty's got a phenomenal display there, and of course, anybody who's been to a lot of the video gaming shows around the country has seen, you know, Atari Museum, and I've always tried, each time I've exhibited, to do something a little different. You know, one focus may be on the ST computers, another focus on JAG, another focus on just, you know, oddities and stuff. So always trying to put something different out, and then of course, you know, putting some of the schematics, the documents, the books, because again, people like to look through that, they'll want to read it, and I think it's important that everyone gets a chance. It shouldn't just be an image on a website. Everyone should have an opportunity to pick something up and try it out. So that's one of the important aspects of this.
So here's something. So as many of you are aware, we had done a Kickstarter for this book, and what the Kickstarter actually paid for was our final trip out to California. Pretty much the last 8 years or so odd years, I mean, has been completely out of pocket. You know, everything that Curt has amassed in his archive, everything I do in mine. So that last Kickstarter thing was for our last interview process out in California. So Curt, what was your favorite interview that we did out there?
That's a tough one. Everybody was a little different. I'd have to say one of the more memorable ones was Ed Log. He lives in a gated community, and I think you'd probably have an easier time getting into the CIA headquarters than you got in Ed Log's neighborhood, because we had to go up to the gate, we had to be checked, we had to go into a holding parking lot, we had to be escorted in. It was hilarious. I'd never seen anything like it, and that was fun because I mean he's got a lot of awards on the walls and stuff, and he gave some great stories to share. I think Mike Alba, that was another really great interview. For those who are not familiar with him, he's really kind of like the guy behind the scenes. Okay, he had his hand in literally just about everything that Atari was doing, from coin-op to computers, and he's a marvelous man. And you know, we went into this little teeny tiny shed, and he's just pulling stuff out and handing it to us, and we're bringing it outside onto the table. All the while, he's got construction workers doing stuff on his house. He was doing something with his kitchen. I think he was re-plumbing the kitchen or something. So we're trying to zip around them, and his wife kept coming over, and he had to take phone calls, and we're going through and looking at things, and he had coin-ops in the garage, and it was a lot of fun to go through that. I think Owen's another fun interview. I've known Owen myself for about 20 years now. He actually we met, and he came out to New York where I live, and he actually came out for a business trip. We spent an entire afternoon talking back in '94 or '95-ish or so, and I've known Owen for a long time. He's a really good man. You're going to get an opportunity to hear a lot of phenomenal things from him, and he's been involved with so much. It's not even funny. And I mean, you're going to hear from a guy that this just shows you the difference between somebody who does video games because it's it's a contract, it's a project, and someone who lives it, who has a passion, has so much love in him for what he does, that this is why the products came out the way they are, and that really sets a lot of people apart. So I mean, a lot of the interviews were a lot of fun. So, Marty and I met with Al Alcorn, and he had us meet at this little tiny, it looks like a prop out of an old 1960s, 1970s Western. It's a little saloon, I'm not joking. Got the high front on it with the wood sidewalk on it, and just this little teeny tiny saloon. And Marty and I pull up, and it's literally in like the middle of nowhere at the foothills of Stanford.
Yeah, I had actually thought he was setting us up, and it was either going to be...
we thought he was going to put a hit out on us. We were going to get killed. They were going to bury us in the back.
I thought it was either going to be a biker bar or like a bar out of Deliverance or something. I wasn't sure.
But it was a great interview with Al, and the whole time he's got this little spider coming off a tree, and it's hanging by him, and I'm like, you know, you got a spider by you. He's like, oh yeah. He's like blowing it away. He doesn't care, and I'm like, you know, I do have an issue with spiders, and for those who are not familiar, I got bit by a spider, got heart infection. I've had more operations than anybody should ever have in their entire life. So I got a thing about spiders, you know. So, but that was kind of interesting. That was kind of a fun interview. I think they were all a lot of fun. They were all just different and had certain unique parts to them, which were you know, really memorable. I think probably the most memorable thing was, you know, we tried to be frugal. We didn't get a nice big town car. We didn't stay at like a real high-end hotel. We wanted to stretch the money, made sure that, you know, we got everybody's money's worth out of the Kickstarter. So I picked a Holiday Inn, which looked great on the website, and then we got there, and Marty and I pretty much figured sometime during the evening we'd start hearing some gunshots, and we were kind of expecting to see a couple of hookers walking by, and, you know, some drug dealing going on down the corner. It was pretty seedy. It was pretty scary, but it was what it was. And
yeah, that's the last time I let you pick it out by how it looks on a website.
Yeah, that's it. I'm not in charge of the hotels anymore.
But yeah, I'd have to say my favorite interview was Owen. Owen was interesting because he lives in a hill in the above Berkeley area, you know, the mountaintops there, where all the homes are like built on top of each other. And we're winding around, and he's got this huge stairwell up to his front door, which we're like completely out of breath by the time we get up there. And he goes, "Oh, I should have had you guys pull around, because there's a back door where the road winds around." So, you know, he tells us
we pulled up to the front of the house, and I looked up at it, and I see these stairs, and I mean, there had to be 200 stairs. And I look up at it, and I look at Marty, and I said, well, nobody told us there was going to be stairs. I'm like, Owen does know I just had heart surgery. I really don't think I'm supposed to be going up all these stairs. And I mean, there were a lot of them. We actually like went up, took a break, went up, took another break, finally got up to the top. We're like, I said, this better be the right damn house. And then we looked through one of the windows, and I could see some arcades, and I'm like, okay, I think we're all right.
Yeah. The other one I'd have to say for me, it was the day after Curt left, was Christine Maddox, who lives down in Santa Cruz. I mean, besides the drive there, where you're basically taking your life in your own hands, because it's winding through the mountains before you get to Santa Cruz, and it's literally 180-degree turns all through there, and these guys are driving on it like it's the Autobahn. I mean, you know, and you hear people say, "Oh yeah, people die there all the time," and I'm like, well, I don't want to be one of them, you know. And these people just don't care. But yeah, but then you come out and you come to Santa Cruz and you see the beach and the ocean, and it just looks so gorgeous. But she was actually a character, because she's just as freewheeling as she was back then. She was one of the hippies that we describe in the book that used to work at Atari when it was first getting started, and her future husband worked on the line too, and she actually worked at the roller rink that was basically converted over to manufacture Pongs. She'd worked there years before when it was a concert hall, and the Doors played there, a number, Jefferson Airplane, a number of other great, 60s bands at that time, which we cover in the book too. But she had a lot of interesting stories to say, some of which we couldn't put in the book, which was true for not just her, but other people too. I mean, there were some stories. I mean, there was a lot of stuff we could have put in that probably would have hurt a lot of reputations, and that wasn't what we wanted to accomplish with this book. We really wanted to pay homage to all the people that work there and just produce something that they're happy of, that like, hey, somebody finally told our story. And it was interesting too, because if you look at the book cover, this was, Curt and I got pushed back a lot on this when we first unveiled it, but we held our ground. This is representative of what it was like to interview these people, because we go to their homes and they still have boxes full of material, old mementos and everything, and they put it out on the table, they start going through it, and all these memories would just come gushing, and we're like, we really wanted to capture that. So that's exactly what we did.
It's like opening up a shoebox and starting to, finger through photos and putting them on the table. That was the whole idea. The front cover was, just kind of a stack of memories, put on top of each other. That was the whole idea of the cover of the book. So it wasn't, fancy and glitzy and all, laid out. And it was one guy actually is a really good graphic designer, and he really lambasted us over the cover, and we're like, it's not what we were looking for. We wanted this to be like someone, going through their old memories, and that was the whole point and purpose of the front cover of the book.
Yeah, that goes.
And of course, there's the naked couple on the back of the book. Got to have that.
That's a couple playing pong in bed. That's representative of the '70s, and some people that actually worked at Atari at that time said we had to have that on the back cover. So that's why it's there.
Let's just put you this way. We talked to a lot of people, and we were privileged to actually hear a lot of things that we had to take off the record. We had to stop the tape. We couldn't record it. We heard some very interesting things. We got our hands on a diary that pretty much details who came into what office, what went on in that office, and with who, and who went out of that office. So we got a lot of stuff we're going to have to go to the grave with. But again, we don't want to cause anybody any divorce or anything like that. So we actually heard some pretty interesting things, but it wasn't. That wasn't the point of the book. A lot of people before the book started were claiming that Marty and I, this was going to be a hack job against Nolan, and this whole book was going to be anti-Bushnell, and that wasn't the case. For those who have read it, obviously you see that. The whole point was, it had nothing to do with being anti-Bushnell. It had to do with, here are people's stories they've told, but here are the facts. And we would get the facts from hard copy memos, the letters, court testimony. I mean, I can't tell you how much money I spent getting copies of court records, and court documents, and then of course going to other people and saying, well, this person, you tell us this, tell us about this, another us about it, and if their stories were the exact same, without us saying, without leading them on, without them they just brought up the story, like, okay, we've got an overlap, we've got a confirmation. This story is in fact true because 2 or 3 or more people have said the exact same story with the exact same people and the exact same events, and then we also had hard copies. So we really went out of our way to really cross-check and cross-check and triple-check, making sure that we didn't let creative license take over. We wanted to present the facts. We wanted to present history. So it had nothing to do with tearing anybody's ego down or anybody's myth or anybody's lore. It had to do with telling accurate history and telling it properly. That was really the whole point of it. It's the same thing with what we're working on with the Tremails. There's facts and there's perception, and we're going to present the facts, and people might learn that they're not exactly the big bad guys that they were painted to be by the media. I mean, it sounded great, you got to have a villain, but at the same time you also got to look at the big picture. So I mean, that's not to say that Jack was a saint and everything was bright and rosy. There's some bad times, but at the same time, not everything that happened during Atari Corp days after Warner sold Atari to Jack was as bad as it was made out to be. And we're in the middle of researching that right now. So that hopefully, if we luck out, we can have that book by the end of the year. That would be phenomenal.
For those of you who aren't familiar with that too, we are doing a second book of the follow-up. We have 3 books planned. The first one was on the original Atari, Atari Inc. The next one is on Atari Corporation, which is the Jack Tramiel company that was around from '84 to about '96. And then the other one is on Atari Games, which was a coin-op division, because what happened in 1984, as Atari Inc. collapsed, it was split up and sold off into 2 different parts. And the original coin-op division went on until 2003 as Atari Games. And it went through a couple name changes, intermediary in that, but it was still a company. In fact, you know, what was interesting was when Curt and I were interviewing a lot of the people from the old coin-op division, they're basically like, well, Atari never died. It continued on. It was Atari Games. That was the original Atari, because Atari to them started as a coin-op company. It was never the consumer. To them, the consumer is what brought the company, you know, what caused all the problems. So,
I mean, we always envisioned this as at least a 2-book project. We always knew that there was no way we were going to accurately and properly pay homage to Atari and fit it all into 1 book. So we already knew this was going to be a 2-part book. We didn't know book 1 was going to end up being 800 pages. We kind of thought 500 or 600. It ended up being 800, and I think Atari Corp is probably going to end up being just as big. And then we've got to also do Atari Games, which was a sudden afterthought. We realized, well, wait, you know, we're not going to be talking about the Games Corporation at all in the Corp book, so we got to do a 3rd book. So now it's a 3-book project. Right. So it's a trilogy, I guess you kind of put it, but it's not. It's just it's kind of Atari Corp and Atari Games Corp are going to go side by side, and it's just Atari Corp dies by '96, and Atari Games Corp keeps going on until 2003.
So does anybody have any questions for us so far that they'd like to ask? Yes?
Yeah, did you get any sort of blowback or anything like that from different people who own Atari and currently Infoground up until they went bankrupt?
Why don't, here, let me give the mic so Curt can hear.
I can't hear anything.
Hi, Curt. It's Farad Mohammed here. I was just wondering, did either of you get any sort of blowback from the people who currently owned Atari up until recently, the people over at Infogram, in regards to the making of this book here? Since their name is, I mean, the product that they bought, its name is all over it there, you know.
You mean the current Atari holder? We did send books to Jim Wilson, the CEO of Atari. We did send books to the legal department. Legal gave it the nod, the go-ahead. They had no problems with it. They just wouldn't officially endorse it or you know, help us with it other than they gave a nod of approval. And of course, we got the release to actually use the Atari name in the original font. I mean, other than that, they didn't have a problem with it. They didn't have any issues, and I really couldn't see them having much of an issue. I mean, we really didn't put anything that would have been detrimental to the company. I think we really accurately described and accurately told the story of the culture of Atari and how it evolved from the 70s through the 80s. So they didn't seem to have a problem with it. But again, it wasn't like we got them to put it on the front page of Atari.com, which would have been great, but hey, no, it is what it is.
Yeah, and people should understand too, between Curt and myself, you know, we're the ones that basically, and mainly Curt, that they go to for any of the information they need on all the legacy IP. Legacy meaning everything from Atari Corporation to Atari Inc. Because they really don't know much about you know what the brand that they're representing. So that they usually come for advice. They usually come for materials when they need it. Curt's provided so much.
That's because I've got most of it. That's why, because they threw it all out.
So yeah, I mean, Curt's provided so much. If you see any game put out that has to do with legacy properties, and they may have some imagery in there or other stuff like that, it's more than likely come from Curt. If they need any advice on legal advice on IP or something, they talk to both of us too. So yeah, it's interesting, and good days ahead for that company too. We're waiting for the auction. So, but any other questions? Yes.
I got a question. I've read some of it, haven't finished it. What would, for people who haven't yet finished the whole book, what would be maybe your favorite unusual, I don't know, anecdotes or revelations about what you've learned? There's such a rich history, and most people don't get to experience it. Any sort of fun little things that you learned or stories about, that someone wouldn't expect about Atari back in the day?
I think for me, I mean, you really, when you start to listen to everybody, there was this common theme. It was, you weren't just working at a company. You didn't just show up and work and stay in your own little bubble and then go home. These people were really very close. It was really a really tight family. I mean, the fact that most of these people, they still know each other. They're all friends with each other, even well after the company is long since gone, is really, I think that's kind of a testament to it. But you really saw a real family, a real togetherness. I mean, even in the 80s, before the Tramiels took over, there were tremendous amounts of layoffs. I mean, literally 80% of the company was gone even before the Tramiels walked in the door. And there's a part of the book where we actually describe an interesting aspect, which is, anybody who's ever been fired from a company, or they've suddenly you're on the hit list, you're on the layoff list, and suddenly somebody walks over your cubicle and says, "Sorry, you've been laid off. You got to go." And they got a security guard there, and you throw your stuff into a cardboard box, and you do what we kind of described as you're doing the perp walk. You're kind of walking out. You feel all embarrassed. You're leaving, and at Atari, they tried to kind of cushion the blow to it. They had employment seminars. They had people for counsel to help them try to connect into other companies in the Valley to find work. I mean, there was a lot of attempts to really help people, not just show them the door and say bye, don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. So I really think there was a strong camaraderie there. I don't think you really see that anyplace else. I don't think I've ever really seen that in any company I've ever experienced. I think that's something that's kind of unique to them.
Yeah, and which brings up a good point. I mean, a common thing we were told while making this book consistently was every person, I mean, because most of these guys are still working either in the coin industry or they're in the tech industry in the Valley right now, because they basically disperse and they're responsible for a lot of the great technology we still enjoy today, believe it or not. And the common thread we heard was they just loved working there. They never worked at another place like Atari since then. It was just very special to them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's pretty much the common thread with them. So any other questions?
That's it.
Well, we're going to have Steve Ritchie joining us in a few minutes. Do you have a favorite part of our book? No?
Nobody likes the book.
He's asking you.
What?
Well, I'm asking you. Do you have a favorite part of our book?
My favorite part of the book is the home computers. Because while the VCS and how it was created and how it evolved is a very, very well documented history, the home computers never worked. It was like Atari put out computers in '79, and hey, you know, they had disk drives and printers and great graphics and stuff, but the story was never really fully told. How did Atari suddenly go from making coin-op arcades to making home video games, and then suddenly they get into an industry which is really completely outside of what they were doing. They were doing entertainment. Now all of a sudden they're getting into computers, which was a different arena altogether. How do you go from that? And that's where the whole section on Stella Gets Some Character comes about, because the idea was to add character generation, actually be able to display alphanumeric characters on a Atari VCS, an Atari 2600, and this evolves to keypad controllers, and suddenly, well, let's start looking at how we could add a disk drive and a printer onto this, and it evolves, and it's going and going and going, and suddenly the idea of, well, let's make an upgrade to the 2600, let's make it more capable, suddenly detaches, and the 2600 stays the way it is. It never changes, and now all of a sudden everything that they've done suddenly jumps over and is taking on a life of its own and is becoming something totally different. And I really think that story was never properly told, and I think that's probably one of my favorite chapters, because it's a part of Atari history that I actually learned a lot about. I mean, again, Joe DeCure, one of the architects of the 2600, gave me his engineering logs on everything he did right up to the day after the VCS was introduced at the CES in 1977, and takes us all the way up through the 400, 800 computer systems actually rolling off the assembly line. In fact, one of the greatest things I think I ever enjoyed out of the book was one day this box comes with all photos in it, and there's this yellow Kodak envelope in it, and I flip it open and I look in it, out come 2 Polaroids. And here are 2 Polaroids of the very first Atari 2600 to roll off the assembly line. And I mean, that gave, I'm actually getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. That's how important a moment it was. I think if that wasn't the single most important piece of history to actually hold on to and to be able to share with anybody, I really don't think there anything else is.
Okay, Curt, Steve's here.
This guy right here had a question. Looks like he raised his hand. With that or wanted a beer, I'm not sure.
You guys went through a lot of work. I didn't read the book yet, but I'm going to, and you guys went through a lot of work collecting all this stuff, and you have this giant wealth, this library of information, and you can only get so much of it in the book or all the books. What are you guys going to do to actually preserve this, you know, the physical original documents and Polaroids and bits and pieces and stuff like that, you know, from all the awfulness of time, you know? Did you hear that?
Yep. Well, one of the things is, first of all, I'm a member of the Society of American Archivists, so I actually take this very, very seriously, and I've gone to classes, I've learned how to properly handle documents, store them, dealing with films and you know, other materials, learning how to properly handle and store and archive these things. I take this very, very seriously. Marty does as well, and we've made some arrangements with certain museums that, especially given the fact I've had a real roller coaster of a ride for the last 3.5 years with my health, with all the operations I've had, this has been a very monumental, you know, of a monumental importance to me, is I can't have what's been accumulated scattered to the 4 corners of the world. I mean, and be lost. So we've been talking to a lot of museums, and we're working out some things where things would be placed into this active loan arrangement where certain museums would caretake things. It would always belong to an entity, which would be, you know, the Atari Museum or the Atari Archives, but it would go out and everyone would get an opportunity. And you know, it's everything by, you know, working out connections with like the Computer History Museum, the Strong Museum, Museum of Moving History, Moving Art, things like that. So everybody's been, you know, been kind of networked and connected. So we've made sure that, you know, this stuff will have, you know, survivability. It will last. It's not going to wind up, you know, being the end scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where it winds up in a, you know, crate and stuck in some warehouse and forgotten forever.
All right. Steve Ritchie's here. I'm going to turn you around so you can see him, and we're going to have him sit down, and we're going to start his portion of the interview.
Okay.
So you can.